Alrighty. So, Liz has served with Send International for almost 40 years in several Asian countries and the U.S. office. Her work in Send Media has taken her to over 20 countries in the world, interfacing with missionaries and hearing their stories to better communicate to partners in their home countries. She and her husband David now work with a large university in China as lecturers and directing a summer English program. She writes for Thrive, the missions blog, and Ask a Missionary, and is a conference speaker, a perspective speaker, and coordinator, a mother of 3 global daughters and 5 third culture grandkids. So let me just pray for you. Good. Lord, I thank you for Liz. I thank you for the work you've called her to and the work that she has so faithfully obeyed. Would you bless the work of her hands? Would you bless the work of her hands and her speech this very hour? Open our eyes, our hearts, our ears to hear what your Spirit has to say to us. In Jesus' name we ask this. Amen.
Thank you, Nancy.
All right.
Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm glad we had at least 2 guys believe this, because we'll be talking about why it's important to minister to global women. And all of you women in the room probably know why it's important, but we'll talk about that. My husband and I have been actually 40 years with Send as of this year. Send International is based in Farmington, Michigan, and works in 20 countries around the northern hemisphere. We have lived in 3 different Asian countries, but much of our ministry has been producing the media tools for our missionaries to use in local churches. And that has taken us into the homes and ministry of our missionaries. And you know, when you come into a missionary's life and you're not their church missions committee, and you're not their boss, you're not their field supervisor, you're just the person with the camera and the pencil and paper, you hear a lot. And it's been really our privilege to be mentors to missionaries as we were doing media along the way. And now in, quote, retirement, we are running an English program in China, and actually we leave in 10 days for China for lectures this spring. But one of the other things we're doing is mentoring young couples and young singles as they get ready to go to China. And again, we're not their coaches, we're not their bosses, we're not the administration. We are simply coming alongside to mostly ask them questions and help them process as they get ready to leave. So that's just a little bit about us. I am primarily a missionary writer, but you will never find me on the web as Elizabeth Gibbons. Because of security reasons, I don't use that name. My writing name is Anna McShane, and so I write for Thrive, I write for the Missions blog, I write for Ask a Missionary as Anna McShane, MC, capital S-H-A-N-E. And that's another thing we'll talk about at some point today, and that is security. Just this week I had a friend, I haven't seen her for a long time, but she's a Facebook friend. She used to live in my community. And she did a post something about, I'm just remembering some of the missionaries that I've known and wondering where all they served, and then she tags all these people. And I wrote her and I said, Catherine, I'm not sure if you realize that that's not a good idea. And I sent her to several articles on security, because I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Facebook as myself, but what goes on Facebook and what happens in China, and what for example, Send International is not on my Facebook page, ever. And I code my words on my Facebook page. I don't make any pretense about being a Christian, but I don't talk about being a missionary. And so that's just a commercial. So we're going to look at ministry to global workers in tough places. Now, what's a tough place? I think a tough place is anywhere that is not your home. We think of tough places as slogging through the jungle or being in a high terrorist situation, but you know what? You could live in the most beautiful city in Europe and have every convenience, and it's tough because it's not home. Now I want to show you 2 pictures, 2 marketing pictures. Which one is the tough place? This is a trick question. They are 1 block apart in Beijing. Now, when I want to get really fun marketing experience, I go to this one. It's tough because I don't speak Chinese well, and so I'm listening to numbers, and I'm the only Westerner there, and I'm pushing through the crowds, and I'm trying to find the right, but the vegetables and fruits are fantastic in this market, and cheap as dirt. And I've learned, when I go into this market, I don't ever have to worry about personal safety. That's not an issue in China. But I can't hear the vendors well enough in the noise to know what they're asking me. So I count how much money I have in my pocket before I go. And when I'm dealing with a vendor, I just hold out my hand and they take, however many coins or yuan. And when I get back, I count how much money I have left, and that's how much I spent. So in some ways, it's tough, but in other ways, it's not tough. And I like it. Now the other market is just absolutely gorgeous. And everything's nicely labeled. But it's all labeled in Chinese. And I can't ask any questions without really struggling because none of the workers in the market speak any English. And also, there are great temptations in that market. They sell Nutella. And they sell Rice Krispies in a Kellogg's. Anyway, in a box. They sell the things that taste like comfort food at home. And so the hard part about that market is deciding what I'm actually going to spend money on and what I'm not. That's the tough. So difference in toughness. So what is tough? Well, I looked it up in the dictionary, and it's marked by an absence of softness and comfort. Very hard to influence. That's true of most places in the world where our global workers are. They're in places that are hard to influence. And it's life in a place that is far from all that is familiar. Now, those three young people, and I call them young people, they're probably in their 40s at the bottom, are really good buddies of ours, but they are all house church pastors in China, and they live a tough life, and yet they don't think about it as being tough. And when we get together with them and chit-chat with them over a cup of coffee, they're telling us, well, that we're having some more restrictions on government regulations right now. So we have planted 10 churches around Beijing in the last month, so that if we have to split up, we've got to find out 10 other places to meet. That's the way they look at things. Whereas we think, the government's going to come in and close down the church. Oh, no. There's going to be 10 churches now. And they will multiply and multiply and multiply. So tough is, there are definitions to tough. Now, here's the thing I want to say. Why focus on women? Well, there are far more women in missions than there are men. Because we have wives, we have widows, and we have single women. And then we have husbands, and we have a small percentage of single men. But there are far fewer single men, and they usually don't stay single too long in missions than there are single women. Also, in missions, women have opportunities to do things that they rarely get to do in their home country. Our American church culture does not generally allow women as many ministry opportunities as they may have in another country. I just heard in the last week 2 stories. One, talking to a 88-year-old retired missionary yesterday, and then the other coming out of the Middle East. The 88-year-old missionary was in Japan for 40-some years, and he reminded me that our top church planners in post-war Japan were teams of 2 women, 2 women, 2 women, 2 women. There weren't many men right after World War II who were ready to lead for missions. And these women came into Japan, and they were no threat because they had not served in the military. They were not men. So they would gather, they would gather believers, they would look in the gathering, find which young men were probably going to be the leaders, nurture those young men into ministry, get them trained, establish a pastor, pick up, and move to another place. Just last week, my husband and I are helping coordinate a perspectives course in Michigan right now. And the speaker last week, who is an expert on the Middle East, said that he has seen many places in the Middle East where women are being asked by imams to work with the people in their villages because, again, the women are not a threat. So there are times when women get into places that men can't get into, and we need to be aware of the pressures that are on women.
What's an imam?
Oh, an imam is a spiritual leader in the Muslim. He'd be the priest, the local priest. Okay? Here's a formula. Men focus primarily on task. Women focus on making life work, plus ministry and task. And when a missionary family moves in, the husband may help find the housing, and then he's off to ministry and task. And the wife is figuring out, okay, how do we furnish this place? Is the water running? Where do we educate the kids? Where do I find food? Is there a doctor? All those things fall generally to the women. Single women have to do all of the life work and the ministry. And sometimes they fall on the cracks between, they're not part of the wives group. They work primarily with the husbands, but then if they only, let's say there's a social gathering, if they only hang out with the husbands, then it's a little awkward. But they may not want to sit with the wives and talk about babies and diapers and teenagers and things like that. So single women are in another category that's just an interesting dynamic. If the women aren't functioning well, everything falls apart. Now, that happens in our country, but it really happens overseas. And many times, if a family is in trouble, it's because something has happened to the wife, and somehow she is not functioning well, and that may pull the whole family out of ministry. Now, it's going to be time for you to talk. This is after lunch, and we all have that sort of, zoom feeling. So, what I want you to do is divide into groups of 4. If you came with someone else from your own church, you may want to gather with them so you're talking about the same thing, but you don't have to. Find groups of 4 and form a little cluster. I will allow 5, but I won't allow more than 5. So go for 4 and get your seats organized so that you can talk to each other. Okay, we've got 5 back there and only 2 here. You know what? You 2 ladies could join those 3 over there, and then we would have only 5. Oh, you did so well. Now, I'll let you in on a little secret. I'm an English second language teacher. The goal of an English second language teacher is to be sitting down drinking a cup of tea while the class is working. So that's the other reason why you're in small groups. Now, I don't want you to use the sheets in front of you right now. I want you to work from your own experience and your own thinking. But we're going to talk about how to ask questions that get good information so you as a caregiver know what's really going on in the lives of your missionary women. So brainstorm categories of questions that you could ask a cross-cultural worker, and what do you want to know, and what do you think they want you to know? And if someone in the group can take some notes, I'm going to give you about 3 to 5 minutes. I want you to work on this without looking at your sheets in front of you. We'll get to those. Okay. Questions? Yes?
What do you mean by category of questions?
Okay, maybe about the family, about ministry, about safety, culture. What are some categories that you think you'd like to know? Okay, go for it. Okay, what are some of the categories that you came up with? This group, give us a category. Safety, okay. Group back here. Cultural likes and dislikes.
We went off the reservation.
We have a counselor
MK, a cross-cultural worker, and one has been another your MK.
So you ask global questions. How about back there? A category.
Recreation.
Okay. Recreation? Yeah, good. This group?
How they're doing emotionally, physically.
Okay. This group?
What kind of relationships are they having?
Okay. This group?
Self-care, spiritual life.
Self-care, spiritual life. What are some other things that haven't been mentioned? Health?
Their visa situation.
Visa situation? Yes. What fun or what are you doing to have fun? Okay. Finances? Yeah. Challenges?
Being in the Word.
Being in the Word, okay. Spiritual.
relationships.
In relationships, yes. Team relationships, yeah. Team. Yeah. Personal relationships. Okay. These are all good ways to ask. Now, what I want you to do next is pick up this paper and turn to the side that's called Questions to Ask a Cross-Cultural Worker. Now, I'll give you my little advertisement spiel. I am here representing Thrive, which is an organization that ministers to women around the world with retreats, with an online magazine, with Facebook, Twitter, all those kinds of fun things that missionary women are enjoying having. So these questions are questions that are given at Thrive retreats to the volunteers who come from North America, so that as they're working with the missionary women, they're just not saying, "Where do you work? Is it hot there? What do you eat?" But questions that actually will generate conversation. So I want you to keep these sheets, and there are extra sheets that I'll pack up. I want you to take extras and give them to other member care people in your church or whatever, because I don't want to carry them back to Michigan. So these are the questions you'll work with from your small group, and we'll look at the other side later. Now, what I want you to do is look over the questions in the handout, and group them into categories, like you were just doing. And then how do they match up with the categories that you came up with in your group? So you're going to look over the questions and try to group them. Which ones are about what topics? And then how does it match what you talked about in your group or what another group mentioned? So let's go, and you have, again, 5 minutes. Okay, let's talk about these. You all get commendation on talking to each other. This is you're keeping yourselves awake, and this is good. So, were you able to match many of these up with the categories that you talked about?
Yes.
Which says to me that you are more perceptive about missionary care than many groups. So, reach up and pat yourself in the back. Now, did you spot some differences? Are these questions different in any way than questions? Yes.
Well, I just noticed that all of ours were very personal, rural kind of questions, and then about work. Oh, you want to talk about work?
Yeah, okay. Good point. Yes. Excellent point, because women are involved in ministry and in personal. Any other differences?
Well, we came up with a new category.
Okay.
Reflection.
Reflection.
The questions where you're asking, what do you enjoy most about your work? If you could share one nugget with others about your time in this country, those kinds of things that make you stop and think, and, hey, maybe this isn't as bad as I thought it was.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
Or at least,
good. Or at least it gives you a chance to express what you are feeling and what you're thinking about. Yes.
Because we were thinking along that same line. You can ask this question, what do you enjoy most about your work? If you get a person that's had a rough time right now, they may say, I hate everything about this work. But then the reflection gives you time to think through, and you can see there are things that work.
Yeah.
Are good.
Yeah. Good. Yes.
Can I make a comment to follow from that? As a global worker, so I work in Papua New Guinea with the Cloud Translators Company for 6 years. One of the hardest questions that I receive is anything that is not a superficial edge. What's the things you enjoy most? What's your favorite food? What's the best thing about this culture? Those are really stressful questions. It'd be a lot nicer if you asked something like, can you tell me something you enjoyed this last week? Give me a couple examples of some things that you really liked about this culture. What are a few of the things you enjoy eating? But don't put it into this where I have to come up with the absolute best answer.
Yeah.
Give me a time frame. Instead of saying, what is one thing that you would share from your entire experience?
Which is usually what happens in the church. Okay, you have a one mission moment, and you put 4 years into the one mission moment.
Holy cow, I can't even tell you everything that happened in my day yesterday. Better just give me a time frame. What happened yesterday? What happened this week? What happened this month? That just takes a lot of pressure off.
It does. So what are some favorite questions on here that you liked? And then maybe you wouldn't have thought to ask. Yes.
This is one I didn't like.
Okay.
The last one, 34. I don't think the missionary should ever have to answer.
Well, okay, but let's get some feeling on that. Should the missionary have to answer that?
A lot of that goes back to time when we were at headquarters. And I can remember someone sending a box of food in 2 minutes and they all dried out.
Yes.
And we were to use them again.
Yes.
It gives me that kind of feeling like I was saying. Because any good housewife, regardless of where you are, would be looking for ways to put coupons.
Okay.
Regardless of
Yeah.
which country you're in, you do it here in the United States.
Right.
or here.
Right.
And so, by saying this, it makes me feel like I have less to worry. That I have to do that,
Okay.
and she doesn't.
Okay. So your irritation is with the second half of the question, not the first half.
Yes.
Because I think that we should be asking our missionaries very specifically, what is your sport level and where are you at and are you short? Now, perhaps the better question would be, if you do not have the proper amount coming in, how does your agency handle that? Because that is a very big difference. You may be working with one agency that whatever comes in that month is what you get. Okay, you have people that give once a year. You have people that give every 4 months. You have people that give once a quarter. You have people that give monthly. So July may be wonderful. December may be great. And November and April you may get nothing if you only get what comes in that month. Other agencies pool within all their missionaries and you get a set amount. Other agencies, you get the set amount no matter what comes in for a month, as long as it all comes in the year. Some agencies make you pay back what you didn't get. Others, it's pooled. Every agency has a way to divide the dollars. And what you, as a care person, need to ask is, how does your agency handle money? Can you show me the charts? Where does the money go to? I remember being asked by a missions committee, this was when they were living in the Philippines. Well, we support people with X, Y, Z, and they only raise this much. How come you raise this much? And we were able to pull out the charts and say, okay, they are not raising their transportation money. They have to raise that separately. They are not raising their housing money. They raise that separately. They're not raising this, that, the other thing. We are raising that right up front. So when you give us X amount per month, you're paying for our transportation to and from the field, you're paying for our housing, you're paying for all the things, whereas they're raising it piecemeal. So their monthly support is this, but then there's these additions on. So ask your missionaries how the money is divided, where the money goes to. Those, as Americans, those are personal questions. As a missionary, that's normal life. And so when I'm at church and my pastors, the elders say, well, we don't divide out how the budget goes to the pastors. I say, why not? Why shouldn't we know how much they're making? You know how much I'm making. What's the difference?
Isn't there, in this question, if we took it one step further, and not necessarily how are you flipping coupons?
Yeah.
But how does that impact the stress of your family?
How does it impact the stress of your
fact
family?
that
Yes.
You can't get out now because you don't have enough money.
Yeah.
How can we help?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I think it's true. I think the missionary might think they're asking me this question because they think I should be doing something differently. But the way we ask that,
The way we ask it, yeah, what's the stress level that it creates?
I don't have enough here. I'm stressed.
Yeah.
You must be really stressed.
There's one question on here that is not asked. And that's a question I think we should be asking our missionaries, and that is, what do you do for vacation? Did you talk about that? Because let me tell you, missionaries feel guilty when they go on vacation. Because I'm living on somebody else's money. Somebody's giving, so I should be working all the time. And then what do we have? We have dead missionaries.
And not just vacation, but ongoing recreation.
Ongoing recreation. Yeah, now some of you talked about recreation earlier. But what are you doing to keep yourself emotionally, spiritually, physically healthy? And part of that is rest and relaxation. Okay, good. Now, let's just go a little bit further. Asking questions. There's got to be a relationship before you can ask questions. Deep questions. And so you can't have a missionary arrive at your church on home service and take them out with this list and sit them down and say, okay, we're going to talk. You have to have some relationship, so it may take time to get to the deeper questions. And some questions are better asked one-on-one, maybe one woman to another, one man to another. Some are questions which can be asked in a group or committee. And so you have to, if you are on the question asking side, you have to decide which questions are appropriate in a missions committee meeting or a missions team meeting, and which questions should I be asking her when we're out to Starbucks for a cup of coffee by ourselves and we've chatted about 5 other things before I ever get to some of these questions. I spent 2 hours yesterday with a young woman here in Minneapolis who's a global worker. I probably talked 5 minutes, and she talked the rest. Well, that's why we got together, because she needed somebody safe, somebody older, somebody who's not part of her life, not part of her ministry, not part of anything, except we know each other. Actually, that's the second time I've seen her face to face, but my mentorship is cyber with her. But it was a listening. And I just asked a question now and then, and we went from topic to topic to topic, and she talked, and she talked, and she talked. When we finished, it was, oh, thank you so much, this was just wonderful, I love talking to you. And I'm thinking, yeah, you talked. I enjoyed it, it was fun. The best part was when she said that her 5-year-old daughter had asked her who she was going to have coffee with. She said, well, an older friend. Well, is she as old as Nanny is? And my young friend said, well, she might be about the same age. And then she told me how old Nanny was, and Nanny's 15 years younger than me. That was good. So, why do good questions minister to the soul of a cross-cultural work? Why would you say?
Because you would feel like you were seen.
Yes. You would feel like you were seen. You would feel like somebody actually cared enough to ask you questions. Instead of just the general, okay, you have 10 minutes, tell us about your ministry. Because there's a lot more to a person than their ministry. Their ministry is important, but it's their whole person that is important. And open-ended questions allow the global worker to talk about what's important to them, and otherwise you may not even guess what's important. You may not know enough to ask the questions. And that's not because there's anything unintelligent about you. It's because you don't really know what's going on in their head until you have that chance to sit down and ask the questions. Good questions allow you to get a lot more than the money question, which is what many missions committees feel like if they have divided up the money properly and they're sending it, and they occasionally do some other little thing, then they have ministered to their global workers. And for the global worker, the money is important, but that's not it. They want you to know what they're actually doing. What's going on in the world. They want you to come into their world as much as you can and understand it. And the more you can come into their world, the more you become attached to what they're doing, and you begin to be concerned about their people, not just about them. Because we are, as Americans, reaching people around the world through our global workers. So we have to take care of our global workers, but we have to think about the people they're reaching. Primary needs of women workers: to be spiritually mentored, to feel connected, to be known, understood, and prayed for, to have close friends, and time away from ministry life and responsibilities. I want you to look at the other side of your sheet. That's where it lists the top needs of missionary women. And then a compilation of common themes heard by counselors at retreats. And you can look through those. I mean, these are the things that women are dealing with. But down at the bottom, there's some interesting questions that I want to look at. No, we're not going to go there yet. I want you to look back at your questions and pick one and talk about where you think the conversation might go. And are there other questions that feed into that? So go back to your questions here and pick one question and give yourself an idea of where you think that might go. Where might that question go? Just take a minute on that.
Just for you. Just for you.
Okay, what are some of the questions that you chose? What are some of the questions that you chose? Does this group have one they chose? Yeah.
Tell me about a special friendship you have with the national.
Okay, special friendship. Very good. Did you choose a question back there?
Yeah, what do you miss from your home since you left your home country?
Okay, I get that question a lot because I commute back and forth to China. What do you miss from your home country? And I say, drinking water and my dryer. And then they say, well, what do you miss when you come back from China? I miss the food. Because I haven't found any decent Chinese food in this country. This group, did you have a favorite question?
She was commenting as a single woman that asking about family is more asking about the women that she lives with.
Yeah.
Housemates and stuff.
Yes, housemates, teammates, whatever.
To know about them and to be able to ask questions about them is important.
Very good. Yeah, back in the back?
I guess one that's personally related to the ones of us that were students is what has been the most challenging aspect of your living conditions. It can go in a lot of different ways.
Yes, yes. Because you could be living in a great place, but there's something challenging about it.
Yeah, like the culture, the people, there's a lot of different aspects.
How about this group? Did you have a favorite?
Number 15, about raising your children in a different culture, the advantages and disadvantages, and you can just keep going and going.
Okay. This group?
What are some of the strengths of your team and the challenges?
Okay, strengths of your team. Good.
25, tell me about your coworkers. It could start probably with a negative, but opportunity to move into the positive.
Good,
of these questions.
good. Yeah, and that might be a very good place to start with a single worker, because they're going to talk about their coworkers first before, a married woman may want to talk about her family first. But, yeah, very good. And you all came up with different ones. Now, if you see that your worker has some real struggles, where do you go next? Because you may not be equipped to handle those issues.
Don't give pat answers.
Don't give pat answers, yes. Don't assume that you can solve the issue for them. But as you look at a global worker, you have their sending church or their sending churches, and you have their mission agency, and we hope they have a mission agency. And there should be care coming from both sides. But if you're sensing that you have someone back to your home church who needs more help, then it's probably important that you be in touch with their mission agency. And as you think about the missionaries you support, do you know their agency well enough to know who you call Who is their personnel director? Who do they report to? Who would you talk to if you sense a problem? Because the mission agency needs to know you well enough to know if there's something going on with Mrs. Smith in XYZ Stan, who do we call and who do we talk to about that? So that the church and the agency are wrapping themselves around the worker from both sides. And it's very important, too, that if you feel there is a need for more counseling, for some life care help for whatever, physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, who do you talk to about doing that? Is that the responsibility of the sending church? Is it the responsibility of the agency? Can you work together to handle those issues so that they're not dropped in the middle and the agency is thinking the church is doing it and the church is thinking the agency is doing it? Now that means as any one given church, unless you're a denomination with only one agency, you may be working with multiple agencies with different people, and it's challenging. But it's important for you to know that. Did I see a question back there? Your comment?
I was going to say, this morning the gentleman brought up a very good point that if you're talking with somebody and they kind of drop something on you as you dig yourself deeper, for me to then run to my pastor or to even call their mission agency without their permission erodes trust, and I'll probably never get them to tell me anything really again. So really the first thing is to say, how can I help you with this? It sounds like you need help with this. What can we do together to get you where you need to go versus...
Very good. Very good, yeah. Any other feedback on this? Yeah.
I was going to say the same thing. A question like, what are you expecting of me? Like, what role do you want me to play?
Right.
Have
Okay.
them tell you what your role is. Don't you say, I'm going to do this, that, or the other.
Yeah, and it may be that a woman confides in you and goes down the road away with you before you actually decide that, okay, it's time for me to say, now, do you think that we need more help on this? Because I'm not sure I'm able to really handle this issue. I'm happy to listen, but I think you need more help than me. And so those are times when, as the person coming alongside a global worker, you have to have discernment in knowing what's the next step. Asking questions. Now, here's the thing. Your global workers aren't with you most of the time. Now, I just want to show you that this is, for my family, this is a family reunion. My husband and I are sitting with one of our daughters in Singapore. That's number 2. Number 1's on this Facebook, this FaceTime, and number 1 is over here. So we have all 3 daughters in the same room, but one's in Mexico, one's in Singapore, and one's in North Carolina. My iPhone is the best missions tool I have had in centuries, because I can pick up my iPhone and be almost anywhere in the world and have a personal conversation with a global worker who's living in another part of the world. And we need to take advantage of the technology. We need to use the technology, not abuse it. I've lived long enough in missions to see the rise, abuse, and normality of communication. We had a whole crew of missionaries go out in the 80s who were so tied to their cable TV and everything that they were sitting up all night watching football games back in wherever home country was, and then they couldn't get up for language school the next morning because they hadn't yet figured out that, either you can slow it down and watch it another time, or maybe I don't need to do this. Or women who were calling mommy every morning. What do I do about this? Mothers who were calling their daughters every day and making decisions for their daughters in another country. One woman, God bless her, wonderful missions committee woman, her daughter went to Taiwan, had a little girl when she went along, and the church that this young couple were working with while they were in language school said to them, it would be nice if your little girl had a Chinese character name. That would help her when she gets ready to start kindergarten. And so the ladies of the church sat down together and looked at the meaning of her English name and what it sounded like and came up with a Chinese name that sounded similar and had characters that could be used. It was a beautiful example of the local church there reaching out to the young couple. Well, Mother, who lived in Maryland, had a Chinese neighbor. Now, the Chinese neighbor was not from Taiwan. She did not speak Hokkien, as the Taiwanese fellowship did. She spoke a completely different dialect of Chinese. But Mother went next door to her Chinese neighbor and discussed it and got a different name. And wrote her daughter and said, you cannot use that name because it's not a good name. My neighbor says it must be this name. Now, what did Mother know? Zip, zero, nada, except one Chinese friend. So that was when communication was suddenly going bonkers, but I feel like it's settled down now. And we are so comfortable with internet and instant communication that we've learned how to use it better. But here's some things that we need to be thinking about. What is their internet access? You may not be able to do FaceTime because their internet may not be good enough. Can you handle an audio conversation only on Skype or any one of the many, many, many social medias that you can use? Are you comfortable with that, or do you have to have FaceTime? Do they have equipment? Do you have equipment? Does your equipment match up? Time zones. They were talking about that in one of the sessions this morning. Oh, it was a small session, but anyway, this guy was in a crisis situation in Asia, and the man in his home church wanted to talk to him at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. That was when he was free. It was 2 o'clock in the morning for this guy, and his wife's in the hospital and in extreme situation, and he's supposed to get up at 2 o'clock in the morning because this guy can't flex his time. So what are the time zones, and how does that affect your conversation? And then what are the security concerns? Because you may be able to have wonderful conversations with a global worker in a limited access country, but you just know there's certain things you don't talk about. Or there's certain ways you talk about things so that you both know what you're talking about, but you're not using the words that are going to be red flags. Those are just things that you need to know if you're going to communicate globally with your workers. But I would encourage you that women living in tough places like to have somebody to talk to. And often they would appreciate having somebody to talk to who can say to them, you know, what's happening with your daughter is very normal. 13-year-olds are always like that. It's not because you took her there, to that place. Or, what's happening in life, this is just the way life is. And often it's a little bit older woman to a little bit younger woman, and you just have that opportunity to chat on a regular basis and share life together, maybe over a cup of tea and a cup of coffee, maybe 12 time zones apart. But there's somebody I can talk to who's outside of my little circle. Many women are lonely because they really don't have somebody that they can talk to. They may have teammates who are at a different stage of life. They may have teammates who are not native English speakers, and so they can't really share their heart. They can work together, but they don't necessarily get down to the nitty-gritty. So think about that with your global worker. And if you're the kind of person that has a little bit of time in your life that you could spend 1 or 2 hours a month just chatting with a person who's living in another part of the world, offer your services. Because you could be a real safety valve for a global worker. So, recapping the other side, it's about being proactive rather than reactive. There's a missionary member care quiz that you can read for yourself, but just a couple things I'd like to highlight. The fourth one down on the first, how do we help young women network with other seasoned workers, even in other agencies, who can mentor them in their region, being careful not to minimize their zeal but offer insight gained from experience? And I would say, who in your church has lived overseas? Even if they're business overseas, that could mentor someone. Top of the next column, how does your church value and protect your single missionary women? I would say that's particularly important at holidays. You know, Christmas comes, and all the families have each other And the single worker may not have what she feels is family for Christmas, or certain other holidays. Valentine's Day. Now, in many parts of the world, Valentine's Day comes and goes and nobody cares. But it is celebrated in some countries. So, do you think about your single workers and sending them something special on email on Valentine's Day, just so that they know that somebody loves them, even if they don't have a spouse? Down the very last one. Be persistent and continue to visit on site as often as possible. Practice the ministry of presence. Many times we send teams to where one of our global workers is, and we have a very task-oriented mindset for the team. They are going to build something, they're going to do a project, they're going to go do a VBS. When was the last time you sent a couple just to live with a family for a week? Take care of their kids, get to know their kids, help around the house, give the parents 2 or 3 nights out. You have to see whether the couple wants you to come or not. But sometimes just going and living alongside people can be a great experience for them. So we have got to finish, but you're not going to discuss this in your group, but I want you to think about what you've learned and what do you need to change in caring for your global workers. So as you go out, 2 things. Pick up some extras of these to give to other people. And then there are 2 other sheets over here. This one is how North American women can volunteer to work at Thrive Retreats, which is just a fun experience. And then this one describes what Thrive does. So if you haven't picked up one of these folders, or you think it would be of value to your church, take it along with you. Thank you for being here.